Where are the low value men? Like, what are all the low value men up to during these trying times? Because the high value men, I know they're around. They won't shut the fuck up. Low value men, I have not heard a word out of. I'm starting to think I'm on their side. I think I want one of those. I want a low value man. They don't make podcasts. I haven't seen one low value man make a podcast. Do they not know how to use microphones? Maybe that's a good thing. That's hot. All right, I've never seen a man use a microphone for good.
Until now, everybody buckle up. It's low value mail time with your host, Danny Polishchuk. What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of Low Value Mail with your host, myself, Danny Polishchuk, on this Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. We have a great episode in store for you tonight with our guest, Johnny Vedmore, all the way coming from Wales for us tonight. So I'm very, very happy and very excited for him to be here, and we're going to be joined by him shortly. Before we get started, though, Johnny is an investigative journalist. I'm going to get into his bio a little bit more, but he's an investigative journalist. He's covered the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. It's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, we all know about this, but I don't think we know the extent of any of this stuff. So he's going to be breaking it down for us. Before we get started, please, as always, just like, subscribe, leave a rating, review, whatever. It always helps. As always, we have an after show, 11 p.m. If you want to get access to that, you can sign up. Patreon, locals, YouTube, become a scrote. There's a free trial on Patreon right now. And then also, I'm just announcing this now. So once we hit 500 subscribers to the show, once we hit 500 patrons or whatever, I'm going to add an extra half an hour to the show. So the show will start 30 minutes earlier. We will have an extra 30 minutes of low value mail. So it's very, very, very exciting stuff. Tomorrow night, we're back with the Bathhouse, 10:30 p.m. live from the Stand Comedy Club Green Room in New York City. We got some great guests lined up. And then this Saturday, if you're in Morris Plains, New Jersey, come check me out. I'm going to be headlining at the Dojo of Comedy East. It's going to be a fun time for all of you who came out and saw me. I was in Saratoga Springs this past weekend, last minute headlining at the Comedy Works there. It was a fun time for those of you who joined me. Said, what's up? Very cool stuff. It was nice to meet you all. And, sorry, someone's calling me. The phone lines are not open. People cannot be calling when the phone lines are not open. And if you want to find out where I'm performing stand-up in wherever you're at, go sign up for my mailing list. There's a link below. You can do that. And then I'm not going to spam you or nothing. Or maybe I will. You know what? Maybe I will. No, I won't. I shouldn't have said that. And they're in the chat asking about female dating strategy. I couldn't do it yesterday. I was doing some other stuff. We'll be back. Don't worry. It ain't going anywhere, people. It ain't going anywhere. All right. So to our guest, Johnny Vedmore. He's a Welsh investigative journalist and content creator for Newspace and UnlimitedHangout.com. He focuses on the hidden histories of the most wealthy and powerful elites. Among many other various big discoveries, Johnny's proved that Klaus Schwab's father was an important part of the Nazis' atomic bomb effort, that Klaus Schwab himself was trained by Henry Kissinger via a CIA-funded course at Harvard, that Theresa May's father worked closely with a famous serial killer, that Bill Gates is a direct ancestor of a knight of King Henry VIII's realm, which I definitely want to know about that, as well as revealing Epstein's close connections with the infamous German tech entrepreneur Nicole Junkermann and their secret meeting in 2002 with two U.S. senators as Lex Wexner's Foxcote house in the UK during the run-up to the Iraq War. Boy, was that a mouthful. Okay, so we're gonna bring our guests on very shortly. He's joining. I gotta do my little dicky do here with all my. So please, talk amongst yourselves, everybody, while hold on 1 second. I apologize for this. I don't have a producer. You all know that. Johnny doesn't know this, but I certainly know this. Please stop calling me. Someone's calling me. The phone lines are just not open. They're not open. Oh, there we go. And let me just, I hate this so much sometimes. Sorry, Johnny. 1 second. Let me unmute. There we go. Johnny, can you hear me, sir? No. There we go. Hello, Johnny Vedmore. Welcome to the show. Apologize for that. I was making a little bit of a meal out of it, as I normally do. But thank you for joining me today on Low Value Mail. I found out about you. I want to say a few months ago. I came across your article on Unlimited Hangout, about World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and you go pretty deep. I want to say that he is one of the more, I don't want to say misunderstood people. I don't know if that's necessarily the right, but he's, there's a shroud of mystery around this guy. Some people know him specifically as the bug guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's just the guy who makes you eat bugs, and that's all they know him for. But I think you, if I'm correct, that's a very small part of this. There's so much more to this. So I don't even know where to start. So if you want to maybe give me, how did you get into investigating Klaus Schwab?
Wow, that was a bit of a journey in itself, I tell you. A whole lifetime journey where eventually I was in a situation where I was an investigative journalist and I didn't understand how I got there. I was a night manager for years in hotels and stuff, and I expected to live a fairly normal existence. And then in about 2016, I started looking into the rich and powerful and realized already I had loads of skills and loads of abilities, and I had already snooped around for years and years and years. And I discovered slowly, and most investigative journalists do this, discover slowly they know things that other people don't know, and it's not written down anywhere. And so suddenly you've got to journal it, and you're forced into it. And then I discovered that, all right, I like this a little bit, and it led to me being around December 2020, watching like this whole World Economic Forum power push happen in front of us, and we're asking, how can we best impact on this story? And we looked around, and it was obvious that Klaus Schwab was the person who nobody knew much about past a certain point. It was like there was this guy born, Klaus Schwab, and then he suddenly created the World Economic Forum in 1971. Boo! It just like appeared on the scene, and everything so quick. It made no sense.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, the Davos thing forever, that was just like, as far as I remember, it was just like elites going skiing. And,
Yeah.
That's like kind of how they talked about it.
That's how they wanted to talk about it, because you don't want to dig away anything in Switzerland. If you poke away at it too much, it starts to look a little bit nefarious. And so, all of the elites like to go there because they're well guarded. It's kind of got like elements, not as extreme, but elements of Monte Carlo where you're not allowed, to take photos, and you have supposed freedom, but there's an underlying understanding between everybody that they're earning a lot of money because the elites are banking in their place, are going to their dining in their facilities, bringing up, and Switzerland has always been a place in Europe which has been a bit of an anomaly, and that's really where the story kind of starts with Klaus Schwab, because if you go back to the start, where I could go back the furthest, I like family histories, I like going through genetics, and so I get like really deep into people's history, and it was really hard because I couldn't find who his father was. It wasn't written down. Normally these things are written down on Wikipedia, so and so, mother and father, so and so, and you can kind of just let them roll on. The best way to diffuse information, if you're an elite or an establishment, would be just to give it out so that people get over it and walk on to the next piece of information that they're going to get angry about, because people do that. We get used to knowledge, and before long it's like, oh well, isn't that a surprise? Klaus Schwab's father's this guy. And so I had to go about this two ways, because first of all, it took me about 4 or 5 weeks to definitively prove who Klaus Schwab's father and mother were, through
And where
like
did you start
multiple
with that?
sources. I had to learn about every time you investigate a really like censored subject, you have to find databases that they haven't managed to censor yet.
Yeah.
And so in this way, there was a brilliant German database. It's like the Landschaft Archive, which I found had some really interesting like notes on there, including a note about Eugene Schwab talking with Americans and doing going through an anti-Nazi training camp, which anti-Nazification training camp, which made me go, who's this? Wouldn't it be great if Eugene Schwab was somehow related to Klaus Schwab? But it wasn't that easy, because I found so many. I dragnet information. So one of the things I used was a Swiss newspaper archive that I went back into the 1920s, because I had to go. I couldn't trace it backwards, so I had to trace it forward. So basically, I discovered who was called Schwab all around Germany.
That must be a common name, no?
Yeah, because it's Oberschwabia. So Schwab is from people from Schwabia, which is where Klaus Schwab's family is from as well. Now, a lot of people would change their name to Schwab as well, like Jewish immigrants especially, because they better keep a low profile, because in the area up until the 1800s, Jews were banned. Specifically, Jews were banned from this entire area that is like part of Oberschwabia.
Okay.
That was after 1400, blood libels, where basically they accused a load of Jewish people who lived there of sacrificing babies in some sort of blood rites, and they basically, the people of all of the areas around there, Landau and other places, all got their Jews and killed them, basically. And it was of course after that kept happening, like outbursts of this sort of anti-Semitic rage in the area kept happening. They just banned Jews from being in there. So there's a likelihood, because Klaus Schwab's grandfather, eventually I had to trace as many Schwabs as I could.
So how far back did you get on his actual bloodline?
Well, I want for him about 1870. I got about to 1874. Jakob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, and he went by the name Gottfried Schwab, which is Gottfried is much more German than Jakob, which is hints of like you might be Jewish. And it'd only been 40 years after he was born that Jews were allowed back into the area. So it was still pretty anti-Semitism was rife in the area, and they were a bit like, a lot of people were there was only by the 30s, when the Jews were being kicked out, there were only really like a handful of really big families living in Ravensburg, the area where the actual city where Klaus Schwab's from. And so
he was born. Ravensburg.
Well, yes, he was born in Ravensburg in 1938, a year before World War II, to Eugene Schwab, because Jakob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, he had met a Swiss girl, moved from where he lived in Germany to Switzerland, got married and had a baby, and then moved back to Germany. Now, when he moved to Switzerland, he had to renounce his German citizenship, and he never gained Swiss citizenship. So when he went back to Germany, he had to have his German citizenship, and that means Klaus Schwab is still not allowed to be Swiss, which is something that he tried to obtain Swiss citizenship.
Really?
About 10-15 years ago, he applied for Swiss citizenship, and he was denied because of the previous case, which was another reason why to look in these sort of archives. There was something in their family history, and this is because he had to renounce Swiss citizenship completely for his family, so that they could be allowed to be moved back to Germany in 1899, a year after Eugene Schwab was born, who's Klaus Schwab's father, Wilhelm Schwab. And they lived in, I suppose they lived near Ravensburg, I believe. But eventually, by the time Klaus Schwab's father's grown up, he first marries this very interesting Jewish lady, who has like 3 husbands, and is like really against what you'd expect to the stereotype of women at the time, especially in that area.
It's like polyamorous.
She just
like a Brooklyn
she had.
hipster.
She was, and they had a baby. I'm not sure if they had two, but they definitely had Hans. I think his name's Hans. They eventually moved to Brazil. That was after they fled from persecution in World War II in 1938. Eugene Schwab's first wife gets out of the country and declares herself a Hebrew when she arrives in America. So she's obviously, saying Germany no more for her, and she ends up living in Brazil. And the reason I know this is because one of the bits of evidence that was a definitive proof was finding immigration forms and photos for them, the family, Eugene Schwab and Erika Schwab, who's Klaus Schwab's mother, going over to Brazil to visit the other side of the family.
Oh, they actually traveled to Brazil. And they have records or just like in a database somewhere?
And not only that, but Hans Schwab actually worked for Escher Weiss Brazil, which was Eugene Schwab's. He was the managing director of that the Ravensburg factory, the massive sprawling factory. It was like it made up basically 2/3 of people who lived in Ravensburg worked at Escher Weiss. It was the biggest employer, and it's like it made big turbines and other stuff that was really in demand at that time because of hydroelectric dams and stuff needed massive turbines that were really a unique niche product that only a certain amount of factories could design and make. And Escher Weiss was one of the main producers of such things that we use in hydroelectric dams, submarines. During the war, they made submarine parts. They made fighter parts for fighter planes, jet fighter planes. They made casing for atomic bombs, potential atomic bombs if the Nazis had got there.
Yeah.
And
Klaus Schwab, he doesn't deny, like, has he ever been asked about any of this? It's never, you know what I mean? Like the.
No, Klaus Schwab, he does. He's very, very interesting. He did mention his father's name once. Now and again, he's getting older, and Klaus Schwab slips out, lets something slip that he shouldn't say. And then he rambles afterwards. And I got to. This is part of the reason why I managed to be able to find out the information about the second part of the series, the Schwab series that I wrote, because he rambles and he gives his game away, and he does it multiple times. And if you study Schwab and his behavior, you could see when he says something he shouldn't say, and you can see that something comes afterwards that excuses, and then that points at the thing that he says, look, have a look at that. And that led me to multiple amazing discoveries. But the first discovery,
he keeps doing it essentially. He just keeps having.
Yeah.
Okay, so
he's going to get worse and worse as he gets
like
older.
80 years old, right?
Yeah, he's 86 or something like that. 86 and looking fresh in his Hawaiian shirt.
He looks actually pretty good for.
Yeah, he does look pretty good for. But you can imagine he's probably had a few things pumped up here and put in there, and rubbed across here and there. Ooh, yeah. But the first discovery was that Klaus Schwab's father was the managing director of the Escher Weiss Ravensburg factory. Escher Weiss was a Swiss company that was run by the Schmidt-Heinis, set up by Walter Zuppinger in, I think, between 1840 and 1860. It took a long time to build the factories, and only started focusing in on things like turbines for dams and stuff in the early 1800s. Moved on massively and became a really important part of the war. And of course, during the war, it was a model Nazi company. So every 4 months or something, they would write up a book, these Nazis, and they would say, who are the model Nazi company? And one of the people featured in this book, one of the companies featured in the book was Escher Weiss, Ravensburg, managed by Klaus Schwab's father, model Nazi company. It was doing fine work. And during the war, they got special exemption in Ravensburg from the Allies, not to be bombed.
Really?
This is
Why?
super rare. Because the Red Cross, the Swiss Red Cross, said Ravensburg is extremely important for our humanitarian efforts. At the same time, I think it was 694 people were euthanized in Ravensburg, and they were using slave labor from people that they had captured soldiers from the Eastern Front were shipped into Ravensburg to help to build these arms, because the factories, like I say, was sprawling factories that are building all the arms, and yet the Allies agreed not to bomb them. And they would have known what was going on. Well, it comes down to the fact that
they were duped.
No, it was one of the centers of the nuclear bomb project, the atomic bomb project. They needed to be able to you have to, if you're both racing towards something, you can't just constantly try and knock out the other team. You want to know what they know. That's where, and so they get their chance of intelligence. If they both know they've been signaled by the other side, don't look here. They start looking there. They work out what's going on, and then they can start infiltrating and work out who's involved, and etc., and build up some fantastic dramatic spy chase that can come to a conclusion with the Allies winning. Woo hoo hoo hoo. And so they would let it go on, and they did let it go on. They didn't do anything during the war. They just let them. They let them try, and they failed. Of course, I mean, we know history, but Eugene Schwab was obviously worried, so he was looking to get out, and that was the first time the Swiss citizenship thing came up, and that was the first moment that I had a document that said Eugene Schwab was the father of Ernst Rainer Schwab and Klaus Martin Schwab, and was married to Ulrike Schwab, and it says it on the document because they were trying to get out of Germany to claim Swiss citizenship and renounce their German citizenship because they once had a Swiss, because he had once had his mother was
and that's
from
after
Switzerland.
Germany lost the war, essentially. So
and he had just been. Yeah, and he's just been working for a modern Nazi company, and they've just watched Nuremberg play it out. And I tell you what, you can't, once you work out what's going on in Europe between the end of the war and say probably about like mid-60s, there's just like everybody's just crapping themselves everywhere. Everybody is just in a state of panic and fear. It's height of the Cold War. We can't even understand what that means now. We've been so desensitized to it. Then it was a completely new thing, and I've heard a brilliant quote that defines it, where someone says, we weren't expecting to die tomorrow in nuclear war. We were expecting to die right now. So anything we did, it did not matter. There was not 20 years to worry about being in prison or something like that. There was no life after that because they had been convinced possibly so readily, because they'd been primed to be convinced. The public, everybody had been primed to be convinced because of that solidarity behind the war effort. And then afterwards, that leaks out into the other system. Now, Eugene Schwab doesn't, again, Switzerland, as it does with Klaus later on, as I mentioned, refuses to give him citizenship, denies the citizenship because of the fact that they renounced Swiss citizenship when they moved to Germany in 1898 or 1899. So Eugene Schwab obviously laid low, but he became quite a big deal. Soon, like a lot of the Nazis were just like given jobs in places where they couldn't be that much hassle, and it'd be a bit of bad publicity. But there was really some big people, like I think von Papen was one of them, who just ended up being a politician again. And some of these guys have done awful stuff. Eugene Schwab become like the head of the commerce for Ravensburg, like this organization set up, and he's got to be understood. The Schwabian people, the people of that area, they live and exist in a place where there's multiple. It's like a thoroughfare for all of these armies of the past. Like there was a Swiss border, there's the Austrian border, there's the Italian border behind the Alps, there's the Germans, there's a different type of Germans, there's Bavaria and all of these powerful nations. There's France over there that could always come in. If Switzerland, they had to basically trade with everybody and keep everybody sweet, so they didn't just become part of that country or part of that country or part of that country or part. So they were very good, and I think it's within I really do believe that it's a genetic trait within the people of Uber Schwabia to trade. to not only trade, but to accept that really, really dangerous deals to keep the peace. And that's something that I think Schwab does constantly.
And that's something he's doing currently, you believe?
Yeah, most definitely. I think I mean that's what comes the second in the series really is important, because I had ended that piece and I couldn't understand a couple of things. It took me a year between the first piece and the second piece, and I researched loads, but I was looking in the wrong place. And I was trying to understand, Klaus Schwab, he does all of these things. I had followed him up. I'd started to see how he had gone through university, left university, gone to work for a company, or gone to work for his father's old company, Escher Weiss, a model Nazi company, once as a trainee, and then later on as a merger in 1967 after he had gone to Harvard. And then suddenly he's a guy who sets up the World Economic Forum, and it's one of the biggest deals around, and all of this and that and the other. And it just seemed to be a gap. It was, I had given people like the history of Klaus Schwab, and they had gone, oh, thank God for that. Okay, now let's get on to the World Economic Forum. And there was a big gap in between that. Klaus Schwab had come from this father. He had been brought up in this area, but there was something else there, and I couldn't work out what it was.
Was it like in terms of
what
time wise? Like, was there a time gap?
Well, in a sense, I've basically worked out really loosely what's happened during a certain amount of time. And then 1967, he works for his father's company. And then 1971, so 4 years later, he sets up the World Economic Forum. And it just seems like there's a lot happens there in Klaus Schwab's life, and I hadn't really looked into it. So I went, what really was the breaker was hunting through again, like I say, I spent a year getting to know Klaus Schwab, getting to know how he speaks, getting to know when he says something he rolls back. So it was like there's a couple of points. One time when he talks about his dad, and then I noticed how he got really nervous about talking about like accidentally naming his dad, and he got really nervous and said a load of things afterwards. And when he does that, it was really suspicious. So I looked for that again and again and again, and eventually I found it. And when he was talking about Henry Kissinger, and he was like, I went to Harvard and I was taught by Henry Kissinger, and I could not afford to go on the course, but he let me sit in for free. And I just like, he equivocates in a way that just now makes me buzz, says something's there. Yeah, and so as soon as I'd seen that, and I'd really like understood where there's something there, I went back and I researched this course that he went through, and it's the most incredible story. It's Kissinger's International Seminar, and Kissinger's International Seminar was run at Harvard through the summer schools. And it had been set up in 1950, 1951, just as Kissinger's leaving Harvard. He's gaining his degree in government. He's written the biggest dissertation in Harvard's history, and he's the big knob on the scene. And everybody wants him. And he applies to work for the FBI, and they say, no, you need to go work for the CFR. So while he goes work for the CFR, he's also based at Harvard, putting on in the summer school Harvard's International Seminar. Now, this was an interesting deal. Really interesting deal. In 1950, it was the kind of setting up a trial run of it. 1951 was the first sort of like, the beta testing, and then 1952 onwards, it became a force of its own. It ran from 1950 to 1967, and its purpose was to train the young global leaders that will be needed to be installed in countries where the CIA has couped. Because at the same time, in 1952, CIA do their first coup in Egypt with King Farouk, with Operation Fat Fuck, it's called.
Operation Fat Fuck?
Yeah. That is the official. I think you probably find it on Wikipedia written. Like it's well known. That is the first name. And he was. King Farouk was a lazy. He was an arsehole basically. But 1953, you had Iran, and you had the coup in there. and so you had this need to create young global leaders. Now, who was funding Kissinger's international seminar? Well, I tell you, the Farfield Foundation, one of the funders, they're CIA conduit. And there was a couple others, the Asian Foundation. But one of the most significant was the American Friends of the Middle East. And they were exposed, I say, in 1967, the year Klaus Schwab is graduating from Kissinger's international seminar, as having funded. Yes.
And also the last
funding the course. CIA conduits. Now, American Friends of the Middle East is amazing. It's Kermit Roosevelt was the guy who helped create the CIA, one of the first members of the CIA, who planned out the entire coup for Operation Fatback and the entire a coup for the first two, of these. He was really vital, really important. He's the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah. So, he really important figure. His father kills himself in Alaska. It's like, it's a really weird story. There's a load of weird stuff with Kermit Roosevelt, but basically him and a few others were very eager. It's a really weird world because they were very eager to influence the world politics and install American-leaning, what would be essentially dictators, but leaders into different countries so that they could stop the Soviet advance that they saw. And they were very pro-Palestine. This is something that before 1967, nearly all of the people who make up the CIA are all pro-Palestinian, nearly all of them. They don't like how Israel's moving, how it's moving so fast. And that was a real big surprise, I found, for me. But they're the main funders, one of the main funders for Kissinger's international seminar. Now, that's known because of this report that was made by Humphrey Dorman once it was revealed that there was two newspapers, including New York Times, and another one I can't remember the name of. It's called like The Rumble or something. And basically, they were going to come out with, hey, look, this is CIA funded course, and we say sorry to cut you off. When you say by funded, like they're just paying the tuition and just the costs of like everything. Yeah,
just the whole thing is just like this.
So the magazine that came out that went alongside the course, and if you look at what happened inside the course, what the course was actually like, it's basically the World Economic Forum. Really? It's basically like, so not only are they training the young global leaders, but they have all of these leaders from around the world come, and all of these different people who are in business and in enterprise and in government come around the world and speak about a certain subject to the rest, and they write it in the magazine that was called Confluence. And Confluence was Rockefeller funded. So Rockefeller was the person who actually I mean, a lot of the people who were involved in these efforts were Council on Foreign Relations during the time where John J. McCloy and David Rockefeller were the top guys at that organization. And a lot of what happens next still involves them, because this CIA funding, now they admitted between 1960 and 1966 how much CIA funding had gone into Kissinger's international seminar, but they refused to give out the previous 10 years because I think it would have been very embarrassing how much money they pumped into this.
Tons. And who are the other, you say these global leaders, do you have a list of who the others are?
Yeah. It's really hard to find certain names. There was an Israeli and there was a Japanese leader who I can't remember the names of. There was Valery Giscard. Now, I think his name was Valery Destin Giscard, who was president of France soon after. There was Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, was one of the young global leaders of Kissinger's young global leaders.
And how does someone like Pierre, I'm Canadian myself, how does someone like Pierre Trudeau get involved in that? Like, is he going to Harvard, or is he being met
so this
at a
is
coffee shop by a guy in a black suit to be like,
This is really interesting because I thought I tried to understand how they did this, and they did this in a very basic way. One of the examples of how they advertised for this was in the Lahore Military Gazette in India, which I found in a newspaper archive, and they were advertising Harvard's international seminar. I mean, everybody called it Kissinger's international seminar, and there was a lot more. There was a lot of other people who were behind Kissinger's international seminar, but it got called that. They said basically it lists what you need. Now, this is where it proves Klaus Schwab was a liar. You see, you didn't have to pay to get on the course because the course was completely free, and they paid for you to go on the course, and all of your travel expenses from wherever you are in the world, all of your stay, all of the sundries, all of the extras, and you were brought there because only at the start it was 50 candidates, and eventually it grew up to about 200, just like the Young Global Leaders did, of people brought from all around the world, all these different countries, brought in to this group to be trained how to be American aligned, and they were looking for the American aligned. A lot of this, it comes down to, and I'll explain it really briefly, but in 1917 you had Willy Munzenberg create Comintern, which was Communist International, and this was what this idea was basically based on. It was trying to get loads of youth organizations and a network of recruiting potential young leaders throughout all of the different parts of the community. And because the Soviets have been doing it for so long, they were really skilled at it. But 1945 is when the Americans realized, and the British, we need to do the same thing after World War, because everything's unstable.
So this is like the ultimate, basically long game here. Like they're really, like kind of planning this out for in perpetuity.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things here. Okay, so there's the CFR and Kissinger. That's what they do. Kissinger is emblematic of the CFR's gray game. There's like everybody in there is going to be 5 generations gone by the time their plan is enacted. You know, that's how it is for probably every.
Still alive somehow.
Oh yeah, I doubt you can call really that life.
Sure.
I doubt you can call that life.
He ain't dead, yeah. So he's basically, Henry Kissinger essentially is the most influential person on earth. Or
yeah. What's really interesting as well, I mean, is the two mentors that Schwab gets given during Kissinger's international seminar, because Kissinger's international seminar, it was a 3-part deal, really. You went to the speeches and the talks by these big leaders who were invited to write in the magazine and speak to these potential young global leaders and inspire them and give them connections. But there was also like a schmoozing party side where they had arranged a little cocktail party between the seminars where everybody would meet the bigwigs, and then they would get given their mentors, people who they went away with, people who would guide them in the next stage of their journey.
Like
usually see.
How long? What's the length of this course? This program was like a single summer.
2 years. It's like two summers. So Eugene Schwab tells Klaus Schwab, go to the only place you're going to succeed in this Cold War era in this world. I mean, I'm suggesting or inserting that he probably said in this Cold War world. They knew what world they were living in, but he said the only place you need to go is Harvard, and that was the center of nuclear war strategy during the time of the Cold War. It was a really important move, and Kissinger's international seminar was more about just like education. So Klaus Schwab went there in 1965. By 1967, he's leaving, and he's been given 2 extremely important mentors. And that's the year where he goes back and he says, oh, and then Peter Schmidheiny, he called me, and his father's Jacob Schmidheiny, who used to run the other, it was like the head of all of Escher Weiss when Eugene Schwab was the managing director of the Ravensburg branch. His son, Peter Schmidheiny, became the CEO of all of Escher Weiss. And he asked Klaus Schwab, you've gone to Harvard now, you know modern business techniques, why don't you come with me? And we'll set up Escher Weiss. And so Klaus Schwab says he goes over there, and basically he's involved in the merger of Escher Weiss with Schulze AG and Brown Boveri company. And this merger is really important because during the time Klaus Schwab is the second in charge of this merger and of all of the companies proffer, they're also selling illegal nuclear weapons technology to the South African regime, while the South African regime, the apartheid regime, has got an embargo on it.
What year was this?
Stopping people from selling. This is between 1967 and 1977. 1979, but he was in charge between 1967 and 1969. So this is like he's doing the same thing his father did at the same exact company as soon as he leaves Harvard, as soon as he leaves a really important person, Henry Kissinger, who had been the father of the theory of foreign policy and nuclear war and foreign policy being one of the biggest books and most important books of that era, and the idea of perpetual war and these things. Now, one of the other fathers of atomic, sort of like the atomic age and keeping peace during it, how it would play out. The big guy, the real big thinker, was Herman Kahn, who was at the Hudson Institute, heavily influenced by the Rand Corporation, and was the guy who wrote On Thermonuclear War, which really stuck the Cold War onto a different footing. He was one of Schwab's mentors given to him. Now 1967, he's allocated Herman Kahn and John Kenneth Galbraith, who I'll talk about a little bit in a sec. He's given Herman Kahn as this person to go back and start setting up the World Economic Forum with. What someone who's selling illegal nuclear weapons technology then is given a mentor, and I get a feeling that somehow there's American involvement, and there's more evidence of that. The other mentor was John Kenneth Galbraith, and 4 years after this time, in 1972, he's mentoring Benazir Bhutto, or at least asked to mentor Benazir Bhutto by her father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and who had met him years before when he was the ambassador to India under JFK. And John Kenneth Galbraith is one of the biggest, most important people in history, especially when it comes to the hidden history of what's really going on. He's a really interesting character. But that, I think, what you saw with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when he was ruling Pakistan eventually gets executed, and Benazir Bhutto, who eventually gets assassinated, of her 2 times ruling Pakistan, is the leaking and the hunt for atomic weaponry and nuclear weaponry against what the globe is saying, including Kissinger, who's warning Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 70s, don't you dare. At the same time, Kissinger is supplying help for Zulfikar Ali Bhutto to get nuclear weapons for Pakistan because they had changed their thinking.
Yeah, so this is all basically based or centered around nuclear.
And it's also centered around Harvard.
And Harvard.
Yeah, because Benazir Bhutto goes to Harvard, gets given John Kenneth Galbraith's son, eventually becomes a lifelong friend of Benazir Bhutto. And John Kenneth Galbraith, like I say, teacher to JFK, was studying Nazi policy, land policy in 1938. Had been placed in Germany just before the war, met his wife there. His wife lived with Hitler's girlfriend. JFK. Yeah, I know.
JFK's teacher's wife was, oh wow.
We lived with Hitler's girlfriend, Kitty Mitford. It's so crazy you can't believe it. Now JFK calls Galbraith like the Phileas Fogg of politics. He's like he's really wants him to become the ambassador to the USSR. That's how important John Kenneth Galbraith is in history. He's really important in history. He's like I believe he's a left-wing fake counterculture option that the CFR put in charge. He was a CFR man for a long time openly.
What's
he
CFR,
says
sorry?
he left. Council on Foreign Relations.
Oh, gotcha.
Council on Foreign Relations, who recruited Hitler. Sorry, that's like Kissinger, straight out of Harvard. He did when Kissinger was recruited out of Harvard. He went to the Council on Foreign Relations to game theory war. Nuclear war. So that's why he wrote the nuclear war and foreign policy book, because eventually he had become the expert by the CFR's help. The Council on Foreign Relations is basically a Rhodesian, sort of from the Cecil Rhodes idea of like how to govern the world. Yeah. Well, I mean, the Rhodes Scholar stuff. There's lots of Rhodes Scholars who are. I follow on another article. I followed a lot of the Rhodes Scholars who were connected to the Royal Society and other things, and these societies were set up mainly after the death of Cecil Rhodes to be sort of like the hidden hand, and organizations like Council on Foreign Relations in America and Chatham House, the International Institute for Foreign Affairs, I think it's called, in Britain. These organizations were set up for the same function, to be basically the hidden hand. And Council on Foreign Relations have massive meetings where they decide basically how everything goes at a real fundamental level and nobody knows is going on. And so these people who are all like the main movers and shakers, who are behind the scenes pulling strings in ways that we don't see in the media, etc. Nearly all of them are Council on Foreign Relations. Even Herman Kahn worked on Council on Foreign Relations for the Council on Foreign Relations on multiple projects, and wrote for Foreign Policy magazine and Council for Foreign Relations in that way too. So they were all connected. And these mentors are no like small thing. Klaus Schwab is given two of the most powerful minds in the entire world at that time, the most diplomatic man, you could say, John Kenneth Galbraith, who could convince anybody of anything. Herman Kahn, one of the most intelligent humans you'll ever meet. You might not like agree with how he thinks, but honestly, his intellect was just one of a kind. Why would they be given this level of help to go and form the World Economic Forum, which was then the European Management Symposium? So it was dressed up as just, it's business. It's a load of people in business. And a part of it was this development of Klaus Schwab's theory, stakeholder capitalism.
Why Klaus Schwab as the guy for this? Because I imagine that you're saying they had 200 people annually. Do you have any like inkling as to why he was the guy?
Yeah, most definitely. He's like Kissinger, like a few other people throughout history, like someone who I'm going to be releasing an article about eventually, who's an extraordinary intellect of his time, is still has problems today. They're selected because they have achieved the most. They are literally the heads of every club, the heads of every society. They have managed to get to the top of every youth organization, every school, or like event, or
like they're just able to climb every hierarchy. Like
they have. I mean, Klaus Schwab may have had like 3 degrees, got 3 degrees in a matter of 4 years, and then was just being thrown honorary degrees, like universities, and he was still a young man. So obviously they've seen something in him, and they've said, okay, that's a sure deal. There's no doubt about it. He will be able to get a load of managers together. He's already got that mindset. He's calm, he's focused, and he's bland and grey. You know, he looks a lot like, when you go back to the 60s and 70s, he looks a lot like nearly every single person who was in the Nixon cabinet of that era. You know, these sort of like wearing big framed glasses, this sort of sunken face, this grey suit, looking really bland and boring, and no one wants to pay attention to him. No one wants to pay attention because they're so boring, and that's what they want. They want you
and that's
to,
now is that by design? Yeah, that you're saying that's by design.
Yeah.
Like, do you think he's acting like that by design, or?
Yeah, I think he knows the game.
Yeah.
He knows it. He knows he's a part in this wheel. He's not the whole wheel. Everybody, like, you know, when they go on about Klaus Schwab, loads of people like to think he's like the ruler of the world and all of this, but he's just he is just the right guy at the right time. And there's another important thing, a really really important thing. A few really, but this is really important. Herman Kahn, between 1966 and 1968, is writing the year 2000 and an ancillary policy document for the State Department. And the year 2000 basically predicts all of the future tech advances that we expect to see. It is an extraordinary piece of work. In 1968, he is able to predict nearly everything that we still haven't got yet, and
that
all
we
the
still
stuff
have
in
not
between.
got. And
yeah. And all the stuff. I mean, all of the expectations we've got about technology in the future were nailed by Herman Kahn there.
Wow.
At the moment, when he's being Klaus Schwab is being given him as a mentor, and Klaus Schwab, I say this in the one of my pieces. Klaus Schwab basically takes that as saying, right, I'm going to use this as a tick sheet to try and advance all of these different technologies as a true technocrat. And that's what he sees himself as.
Like, is that where that stuff comes from?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, that is even
Not to
mentioned in it.
Even
That's
the bugs.
that's
But
it.
like...
Yeah. And the bugs is, I mean, what they don't want us to PR wise, and I know a lot about the main PR guy
or like
behind
the Great
the World
Reset,
Economic
just
Forum.
all the stuff that's like the most known about.
Yeah, they don't mean for it to go out of control like that. They think it's a good idea and they think it's bland enough at the time, but then sometimes they're too good at branding. So Great Reset, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, eat the bugs. All of those things are things when they go, oh God, we should show that too much of our true face. Because with technology, what happens is if you want to increase the technology and you want to make all these things happy, you're going to have to make people unhappy eventually, because loads of people who are used to the past won't want to adapt to the future. And that's the way it's always been. But some technologies you don't need and some you do need. And Herman Kahn said himself, in the same way that Schwab was saying tick, 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 tick to all of these predictions, made these very accurate predictions made by Herman Kahn. Herman Kahn said, we must be so careful with all of this stuff, because if we go too far, we risk basically destroying everything. On the second of the Schwab piece, Schwab pieces that I wrote for Unlimited Hangout, there's a paragraph at the end that if people don't want to go through the whole article, which is a really thorough article, if you go to that very last paragraph, the statement that Herman Kahn makes is just extraordinary, and it's still today, it like sends shivers through me and should send shivers through everybody who reads it. It's a really important moment we entered into in history, and Herman Kahn was really important in that. So the fact that he gets given these people, and they are the people who open up the first World Economic Forum. John Kenneth Galbraith is the speaker, the co-main speaker of the events, alongside von Habsburg, Otto von Habsburg, who's also a keynote speaker, I think they call it.
And sorry, I was just gonna say, in terms of motivation for them, like, is it actual power, or is it like they just want to kind of call the shots about everything and just really run the show? Like, what is it? I guess those are kind of run hand in hand, but
multiple things. One of the really important things that people don't understand, they say, oh look, they go to World Economic Forum, but they don't do anything devious there. But they do. They connect with each other. Devious people connect with other devious people, and then they're able to go away into the shadows once they've met at this nice little soiree that they have up in the mountains, where they all go skiing together and everything's so nice and they have such nice food. They all then go away, and then they're able to meet in dark rooms and make all of their nefarious plans. We see it as World Economic Forum, and that kind of suits them as well. Oh look, they're there, and everything they're talking about is what they're focusing in on, but behind the scenes they're doing terrible things. And we know the people who are, if you go through the history of the World Economic Forum, there's not many nice, like, it's not really full of nice people. I've known people
not nice
who
people, and they're very influential in world politics. Like, these are the people who have the ear of all the leaders of all the countries for the most part.
They go there and they feel like they're part of the club, and it's a club like of evil James Bond characters who want to hang around with other evil James Bond characters. They're just like they're desperate to be part of Spectre, you know. And what's really intriguing is given that they're kind of given that by that being brought up watching James Bond movies and all of this sort of stuff. And the people who created James Bond were like Ivor Bryce, who was the only British member of the OSS during the war. Of course, the main writer Ian Fleming, who was the best friend of Ivor Bryce, he was Goldeneye was his retreat in Jamaica after he worked for special services during the war, and they continued to afterwards, and they had to keep promoting it. So, those people, in a sense, those elites, have also kind of been brainwashed by other intelligence agents. And if you look at it, it was set up to look like it's about business, but it's, I mean, there's a lot of businessmen there, but there's a hell of a lot of intelligence linked people there. And most high up executives nowadays have their intelligence links, because once they get up to a certain point, they're in the club. You're in the club.
Yeah, you can do huge damage if you're the CEO of JP Morgan.
You got a stake.
Yeah.
Oh God. I mean that's one of the many companies, one of the many banks that are basically becoming like the people who you see at the World Economic Forum, Vanguard, BlackRock, all of those people, all those companies, all those entities that are swallowing up everything, and at the same time working with all the gangsters in the world, getting away with it. And that's why they're at the World Economic Forum. That's why they're hanging around there, because they keep getting away with it while they're hanging around with their mates,
right?
And we know that.
That's the protection.
There is
just 1 second. I'm actually I'm going to open up the phone lines because we're almost at the 10 o'clock hour. So you can continue. Phone lines are open if anybody wants to ask Johnny a question. 1-888-949-2969 if you have any questions for Johnny. Anyways, continue, Johnny.
Yeah, I was just, what I was going to say is that I wrote a third that was called Kissinger Continuum. There's actually 4 parts to the series, but I wrote a third that was called Kissinger Continuum. And that really looked at the fact that by the time the World Economic Forum got to the past the fall of Berlin Wall, 1992, 1993, they were setting up the first Young Global Leaders, which was Global Leaders for Tomorrow, which Bill Gates and Tony Blair and all these other people were all part of the first year. And this was to train young global leaders. And eventually in 2004, that was finalized to be the World Economic Forum for Young Global Leaders. Yeah. And that was funded by the Dan David Foundation. In 2004, $1 million was given to Klaus Schwab, and they said, what are you going to do with it? And he said, I'm going to set up the Forum for Young Global Leaders. And who's on the board of the Dan David Foundation at the time making the decisions? But Henry Kissinger himself.
Really?
So Henry Kissinger,
they're all just they're all, everybody's just so intertwined. They're holding on to their power, essentially. And then, like, as long as, like, nobody wants to give up. When you have that kind of power, and I guess you think Henry Kissinger thinks it's more than power? Like, he's just like, I'm required for the fate of humanity? Like, is it something to that extent?
He has had a lot of positive reinforcement for all of his behavior all throughout his life. So if you're constantly having people tell you that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, then you just keep acting in this way that you're acting. And at the same time, if you actually, I mean, on the 4th article, I studied what happened after the fall of Kissinger's International Seminar at Harvard. About 5 years later, they set up something in the German Marshall Fund called the German Marshall Fund, which was based at Harvard, funded by like 250 or 150 million in Deutschmark from the German government, Willy Brandt, and that was eventually become Harvard's version of the Young Global Leaders. They have 5 different young leadership courses run out of the GMF, and it was even run by a woman. Why would her name escape me now? Abby Collins, and she was the person who had run Kissinger's International Seminar, and she's running this new seminar. And in there was the head of it was Guido Goldman, whose father was one of the founders of Israel, and Guido Goldman was Kissinger's best friend, literal pillow fluffer, used to go around to kiss. He lived in Kissinger's apartments. They were like, they'd be a comedy couple together. Honestly, if you could make a sitcom about them where they're all just hanging around and doing their normal New World Order stuff back in the 60s and 70s. Like Guido Goldman actually sets up Kissinger's 50th birthday party just after Watergate, after he's been caught spying on everybody, and and all of the people who turn up are people he spied on. But these are the people who are involved in this sort of network. Guido Goldman, also, one note about him that's really interesting, he buys Jeffrey Epstein's house off him.
When was this?
Yeah, this was in 2006 or something along those lines. He bought, no, it was in the 90s. He bought Jeffrey Epstein's property off him for Edgar Bronfman. One of the properties that were two next to each other. There's all sorts of links. Yeah,
and they're all somehow. You obviously, I imagine you have some opinions on Jeffrey Epstein. Not to get too far off. But like, how does just? I'm sure people want to ask this, and again, if people want to call in, but how does how does he tie into that other than just being some guy who's somehow around all these elite like?
All right, there's a period during like post 70s, really around the time Gerald Ford gets in, and then Reagan era, especially those two sort of like terms in America where the CIA and the like are given like free reign, and there's lots of operations go up and lots of new people that enter the scene.
One sec, we got a call here.
Okay.
Just one moment, please. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail. 1 second while we patch you through to Johnny, and you are live with Johnny. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, Johnny, this is the Goob.
Yo, Goob.
So I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any, or do you go into Baal, Moloch, and, ancient knowledge, and do you think that plays a role in any of this, that there is, these elites hoarding and sharing ancient knowledge and practicing it, and potentially worshiping these guys?
Yeah, man. There's loads of elements to it. So recently, I released the first part of it the other day, and I released the second part soon. It's called The Owl, the Mortarboard, and the Almighty Dollar. The first part, and it's a look at Bohemian Grove, which Kissinger and all of these guys were involved in, and where it actually come from. And it is there's like lots of ritual symbols. Moloch the owl is there, and it's given the name, and it's and it's presented with these rituals that go on throughout history. And something like that set up in 1872 is questioned even all the way through all of its running, but has continued to still be something that these guys get involved in because they're drawn to this. They're drawn. A lot of us are drawn to the past. A lot of us are drawn to the past. I feel it myself. I feel it being a Welshman. I feel Celtic. I feel like a real link to sort of like things that are symbology of that era. And maybe if I was a different way of thinking, that I would be looking for the dark parts of that. And so I'm talking with a guy on the Newspace podcast tomorrow. I'm literally going to be recording it, which he's going to tell me the real, like a lot of the history behind like the one eye symbology, the covering the eye, which eye you cover, which hand you cover with, where it all comes from originally. And I've done a load of research into that sort of stuff. And what I love is that it's like history repeating, isn't it? It's these cycles, and it's really easy to work out who's evil because they tend to be drawn to practicing and worshiping evil arts in some way. And these guys need clubs. I like war games or stuff like that. I like to have a place where I can go and chill out with the boys and play poker or whatnot. These guys, they go off and they run naked through Bohemian Grove alongside the Russian River while Moloch the owl watches over them. This is just the reality. And they when the one I will be releasing in a couple of days, that's about Bohemian Grove. The second part of that looks in the 60s and 70s about how you see the press are turning to say, if you question what's going on at Bohemian Grove, you're into conspiracies and you're just wild and out there and you're just looking to protest for the sake of protesting and all of this sort of stuff. They try to make you feel mad for looking at what they're doing. That's always a sign that these guys are hiding something.
I'm pretty into conspiracies, and I think Bohemian Grove is, very much publicly what they do, and they're into much deeper stuff than that in private. So
you could definitely
call
tell
me crazy.
No. Loads of people could call you crazy for loads of different reasons, man.
I'll still believe it, though.
Yeah. It depends which room of people you're in to be whether you're going to be called crazy. But I keep coming across. I'm researching someone at the moment whose father ticks all of the boxes. I already know what his son's done, but his father ticks all the boxes. He was Bohemian Grove attendee, and he is a 33-degree Mason, and he is Scottish Rites Mason, and all of these things are ticked along the lines. But they should become as well a footnote in what the actual intention and the manifestation of the behavior of that person throughout their life, and that's what they should be judged on. Of course, there's people out there who are really naive about this sort of stuff, think that letting in sort of dark evil stuff into their life will make their life better, and people don't realize, it's you get what you give, you get out what you put in.
Yeah. How's that group?
Yeah. Good answer. Thank you. I'll let someone else go on. Appreciate it.
Later, buddy.
Nice, man.
Well, the goob, everybody is.
How do you like the goob?
Yeah, he's a good dude. I have a question from one of the patrons that I'm going to ask you that he dropped. He says, what do you think of the Argentinian nuclear project in the 50s? How much of it was just a continuation of the Nazi nuclear problem? And was it more successful than it's made out to be? That's from John.
Oh, you just got me interested in looking into a whole new area for me, because I can honestly tell you, I don't know, but I find the progression in Latin America really interesting, and I would love to know more, because I started looking into Escher Weiss's situation in Brazil, to where Klaus Schwab is. There's one point where I found a Klaus Schwab living in Colombia during a time where Klaus Schwab is missing off the radar, and I just find it really strange and suspicious. And I think, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, what's the record in Colombia that you found?
I think it's in a newspaper. I think it's in a newspaper archive. Anybody who's got one of the big newspaper archive site could probably go to type in Klaus Schwab and look for about 1950s sometime. You'll find a lot of Hans Schwab, because he's mentioned during that period. But it's about 1960, probably about 1965, 1966, maybe earlier. But anyway, yeah, it's these sort of things you have to look into to understand the bigger picture. But it's constant. You have people ask you questions about stuff that is just I really got to get into that now. I was already dipping my finger, and I was living in Chile for the past 6 months. And
yeah, you were there all throughout COVID, right?
Yeah, well, I was in and out through COVID.
Yeah.
I arrived a week before lockdown, or a couple of days before lockdown over there, and it was severe, man. You had to have a special form to get into a shop, and you only allowed out 2 hours a week, and you had to have this form, and that included driving to the place, and everywhere's out in the middle of nowhere. So it's completely impractical, and it was awful. And they wouldn't let me in for 6 months. When my child was being born, they wouldn't let me into the country. They'd even got the Chilean embassy to pretend they were open online. The number and the email address never responded and never answered. And I went there, and there was 2 security guards there, and they were like, "No, it's been closed for 4 months." And they just pretended. Yeah, it was serious COVID stuff that happened all over the place.
They couldn't even work remotely.
They were unwilling to. The
unwilling
security
to.
guard gave me another email, which obviously they do for people who are distraught and at the door and won't leave. And so I contacted that email, and the person got back and denied that they were closed. Denied it, even though I was standing with the security guards, and they've said themselves, and it's just insane. So I was down there. I find all of what happened afterwards. I've been researching Operation Condor recently, which was Latin American shared intelligence operations network between a load of different countries, where they would use their assets on a job in another country, so it was really hard to trace back who was originally, which country was originally in charge. So there was a lot of obvious Nazi influence as well in Argentina.
Of course,
And Argentina is a special place. It's really got a strong Italian descendancy, so a lot of people there are actually Italians, and it's a very interesting place. I would love to go back. So my answer is I'm sorry, no, but I will get there. Ask me again in 2 months.
Yeah, you'll be on the Argentina tip. So I can't imagine that you're done with your investigations into what is your objective? Just to get as much of this out as possible. Like, do you how much do you think you have left to kind of dig through?
Yeah, this is it depends what subject and what, because with the
sorry, actually, you know what? Hold that thought. I got another call.
Okay,
so let's take a
call.
Cool. Yeah. Hello. 1 second.
Hello.
Hey, what's up? Let me just patch you through to Johnny. He's lighting his spliff. One moment, please. And you are on the air with Johnny Vedmore. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, what's going on? Danny, first of all, bro, you keep doing real good, getting great guests every week.
Thank you. And I appreciate the guests for coming on.
And yeah, I'm just a globalist, not that kind of globalist. Like
we had a flat Earth guy on, Johnny, a couple weeks ago, Flat Earth Dave, and he calls all people who believe in spherical Earth globalists.
Wow, he's right. He's got us there.
Yeah.
What can we do about it?
I was made me laugh. Anyways, go on, caller.
So my question was for Johnny is if he's familiar with the topic, but basically all of the backroom deals that were done by basically by Her Majesty's government, especially, well, I mean, it would be His Majesty's, because everything basically with the Middle East after, Lawrence of Arabia and the formation of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and basically my whole thing is everything between Iran and the Mediterranean Sea is fake. Iran's fake, Syria fake, Iraq's fake, the land of the Philistines fake. But my question is, how far do you know about things done by the Zionist lobby in what's y'all's Congress, in Parliament, done especially during the 1939 when a bunch of Jewish refugees were turned away from England, and then they were turned away from America because Winston Churchill told FDR to do the same, and then turned away from Brazil. And the whole conspiracy that the Zionist lobby knew that there was the Holocaust and the eradication of Jew, but they would use that as a way to basically convince people to create a so-called quote-unquote Jewish homeland in the Middle East.
Okay, I can answer this. I can tell you. I can answer this. Very good. I'm actually working on something with a really interesting guy at the moment, and it came from, I mentioned Guido Goldman earlier, who bought Jeffrey Epstein's house off him for on behalf of Edgar Bronfman. Well, his father was Nahum Goldman, and he was one of the people who did what you're saying there. He was one of the leaders of that, like the big guy. I found an amazing quote about him, and I can't wait to I think it might actually be in the German Marshall Fund piece, but about what he did in the backroom deals when it was for the creation of Israel. Now, before that, in the 20s, these guys come from really interesting backgrounds. Nahum Goldman was born in Lithuania. He ends up being secret intelligence post World War I in Germany. So he's working as German undercover intelligence for years and years, like the birth of German intelligence service, proper modern service. And then he starts to basically become a Zionist. His father was a big Zionist, but he become an influential Zionist. Nahum Goldman had already written about Zionism and believed that the Jewish homeland had to be. He had already gone on the pilgrimages and stuff. And what they started to do in the 30s is go around and point out to all of the people who were in very weak and unstable governments that were near the Nazi sphere of influence, that your guys are going to die soon if you don't do something about it, and your guys are going to die soon if you're going to do it. And it does seem like he was warning not the Jewish people who lived in the countries, but the countries that there was war coming, but without any idea what to do with that. And you could tell that by their rhetoric, they say themselves, we are not going to force Jewish people to leave when there is a genocide. They will get killed. You know, they say it out loud. They knew what was coming, and they didn't lobby to save. A lot of these guys, these top Zionists, knew that the harshness of what would be seen enacted upon Jewish people through World War II and before by the Nazis. They knew that would be coming because they wanted to create, they had their agenda already. They had decided that Palestine was theirs, and they were going backwards and forwards, and they were creating organizations all throughout Palestine preparing for when this happened. They knew World War would be a catalyst. So when World War happened, suddenly they become the people who are like, oh, we are really important because you're about to rue the day you ever said anything about us, because the sympathy that was about to come to them, that they knew was about to come, was going to be utilized as a currency, a political currency for them to get what they wanted. And the UN was created by all of their friends. So Eleanor Roosevelt, very close friend to Nahum Goldman. Nahum Goldman had fled from Nazi Germany. In actual fact, he lived in Switzerland, and he moved over to New York and before the war. And then in New York, they put up all of the big statesmen. So Weizmann, who I think was the Chaim Weizmann, who was the first proper president or prime minister of newly founded Israel, was a regular visit to Nahum Goldman's house before and after. Eleanor Roosevelt was really close, and she was really important in the forming of the United Nations. And the United Nations, when it was built, Nahum Goldman got his own office in there to start for the lobbying of the state of Israel. And they you know, some of
what
the
year was this?
This was the 1945, 1946. Okay. He was installed in the UN, and they have their own office, and they're lobbying for the creation of the state of Israel. And it's not going to be long before the state of Israel is forced upon them. And the British were crapping themselves about it from well early on. They knew they held Palestine. It was British Palestine. That was that was one of the key important places to hold, and they knew it, and they tried to stop the Zionists taking over and getting their way. But eventually it was Truman. Sorry, go on.
Is this before or after or during the Balfour Agreement?
I listen, I know only the bit that I've researched so far. So what year is did you say the Davenport Agreement?
No, the Balfour.
But the Balfour Declaration, right? I thought you said Davenport. Well, the Balfour Declaration, when was that? That was quite early, wasn't it? That was just post World War One, I think it was.
Right, yeah.
So this is well after. This is probably about 20 years after, because that's part of the reason. I mean, the British already had rights they fought to this land, and it was pretty clear that after the Holocaust, the sway was, and the wave of sentiment was completely and utterly astounding.
Done deal,
And
essentially.
yeah, they got given. Now, a lot of Americans did not like it. A lot of Americans didn't want that to happen. They saw it as a very negative thing at the time. And there was a big propaganda push by some of the biggest Jewish organizations out there to even, I say there's a big propaganda push. This comes up in the third Schwab article. There's a big propaganda push by the Jewish people to lobby on both sides. There's some who are saying, no, there shouldn't be an Israel. And there's a load who are saying there should be. So it's like a divided America on the Jewish front. But a lot of the normal Americans weren't very interested in this. They had to be forced upon them. And by 1967, they had no choice anyway.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, it's also interesting that like people like refer to Israel as like a Jewish homeland state, and that came out from 1948. Do people not know that like the first Jewish state was created by Stalin? I think in like 1936 in far eastern Russia, the Jewish Autonomous Oblast.
Oh yeah, the Jewish. My parents. My parents have actually. I have family from there.
Really?
Yeah. My parents are Russian Jews.
But because Ashkenazi sort of, do you know a lot of the mafia?
I only heard that term. My mom used it recently, or like someone. I was like, what are you even talking about? They're like, yeah, there was like this specific thing in Russia.
Yeah.
I don't.
Big
but
as well.
I think they created it to like get rid of the Jews, though. Yeah, they were like, just you go there.
Yeah, there's space of that.
Yeah.
And then I had one more last question for Johnny, and this is something a little more. We're still on the topic of Israel, but also like how they're involved with England and the crown and all that. So, are you familiar with Israel's Samson option? That if they get attacked by
Yeah. I got the book behind me. Yeah, but go on. Explain for other people.
Yeah, I don't know what this is.
What is? So basically, it's like if Israel gets invaded by any of the neighboring Arab countries and none of the world comes in to intervene, they will use, because Israel operates under the principle of nuclear ambiguity, basically meaning they have nukes, but they won't even admit to it. But their whole thing is that they get invaded by neighboring Arab countries and the Western powers don't intervene to help. They will basically launch nukes, and they'll aim for places like Moscow, Rome, Paris, London, DC,
Really?
and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so
like basically
it comes from the tale of Samson.
Yeah.
It comes from the tale of Samson because he was brought to the court by the Philistines, and then he pushed the pillars out, dropping the ceiling on him and everyone else, and the people who captured him. So,
you know, when we talk about this, what's really interesting is what the word that come up when you were talking about the Russian place, autonomy. Like the Jewish people are very much about, and they when they're bunched together in their own country, they're very much about themselves, dependent on what the political situation around them. They change and they re-ally with different people depending on who they need at the time, and that's been a survival mechanism for them throughout history. And I think we see it all of the time, and this is why it was so amazing to find out the American Friends of the Middle East were all like anti-Zionists. I just didn't expect that the beginning of the CIA was going to be basically made up of a load of anti-Zionists, while at the same time their government was basically creating and forming Israel because it would give them instability.
And how did they reconcile that with like just the anti-Zionism with the CIA, with the fact that they just had to? They're just like, all right.
Once the bosses upstairs said they had to do something, they just had to do something. Gotcha. So that was it. So I think it was the Dulles brothers who were really really influential in keeping those anti-Zionist in tow until 1967, and they lost I mean, by 1967 you've got a push in the media as well, massive push to say like Gildersleeve and Kermit Roosevelt and all these people are really terrible for being anti-Zionist. And it really there's like you say with this Samson option, like that idea is what Israel was made to be by people like Truman. That fear that it could just pop at any time, anything could go, and it could just destroy loads of things and peace and all of that. That fear, that perpetual fear, is what they need to create. Yeah, that's the psychological warfare that they're using to keep us all nice and calm and in line and doing whatever they want to do. But maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. But they set it up to look like it is, at least to us, so that they can continue to rule us.
Okay, we're gonna take another call right here. One moment, please. Hello. 1 second, please, while we patch you through. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, it's Greg from New Hampshire.
Greg. Okay, 1 second. Greg. All right, Greg, you are on the air with Johnny.
Hey, guys. I just had a question that's sort of topical to the times we're in. There's a candidate running for president. I'm sure Danny's familiar with Vivek Ramaswamy, and he's been
I'm trying to get him on the show. Actually, I've spoken with him. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Maybe I shouldn't speak then.
I don't care. I'm not like.
So here,
I just get interesting people.
I have a point and then a question, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
Johnny. So he was accused of being a WEF global youth. Is it youth leader? Global youth or something like that, and. He denies this.
Oh, he is one of them. I didn't know this. I had no idea.
Yeah, but his picture was used on the website, he claims, without his permission, and he is sort of painting it as an attempt to associate him with them in an attempt to, defame him in a way, or to cause him strife. But he has a very earnest way of speaking, and sort of a message that resonates with a lot of people. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about it.
Well, it's really interesting because I talked to the campaign manager. He's going to be one of the first podcasts out on Newspace podcasts that I'm just launching. I talked to the campaign manager of Eric John Berner. And Eric John Berner is one of the lesser known Republican candidates that is trying to get momentum up right now. They've been touring through the country. They just gone through Iowa. They're going up to New Hampshire soon, doing all of the routine. And he was actually talking about this guy who I've already knew. I don't want to dare say his
interesting
because I get it wrong.
No, go, dude. Tell him.
Say it. I mean,
Rama Shami Wami Do.
Vivek Ramaswamy. Because you know what, he really did. Vivek Ramaswamy. He really did just like pop out of nowhere. I feel. I don't know if he just has tons of money and he's able to kind of make that happen with.
He does.
But
yeah, he has a lot. He's a successful, business type.
I mean,
he was called industrial politician, sort of by.
Well, maybe. I mean, I will ask. Have you listened to what he has to say? His actual position.
No, because I've only got to the point of examining the presidential race just at the moment, and I had only come across that guy because I had gained access to a document that was like all of the young global leaders noted down.
Yeah, and his pictures on it.
Yeah, but this is like a separate one that kind of confirmed that he was on it from potentially another source, but they could just make it from just someone going through the site anyway. I'm not sure when they say all of this. I'm always just like I'm always really super suspicious why I can't imagine that the World Economic Forum would have done that without feeling that they were aligned in some way. But I also wouldn't put it past them because they're a bunch of devious gits, aren't they? I mean,
I agree with you, but I wonder, it's been corroborated not corroborated his situation, but other people have claimed the same. Other people have said, hey, they did this to me too.
Yeah, I wonder if that's due to people who are like realizing that, because before the World Economic Forum was really known as this nefarious dystopian sort of potential dictatorship of the future, globalist dictatorship of the future, but everybody was kind of like, I don't even know who the World Economic Forum is, and lots of people who were probably naive to an extent, like who's that woman who writes Harry Potter? She was one of the young global leaders.
Rowling.
J.K. Rowling doesn't seem like a World Economic Forum type. It doesn't like them at all, she says. But then, these guys like their Hegelian dialectical, they like to like have the opposites on the same side. So like Viktor Orban, is one of the young global leaders of the past, and also a Marshall Fund Memorial Fellow, or whatever it's called, from the German Marshall Fund. So another one of the young global leaders style programs. And yet they say he's all of the people in charge of the World Economic Forum, and at the top say he's a terrible leader who's basically a dictator and all of this, and they all take that line, and it feels like they stick them up and they create them to be the opposite force to them. So at the same time, they're a machine creating not just one face, it's not just one type of person, they're creating both sides. So they're saying
the choice, but yeah, it's two sides of the same coin, and you end up with the coin.
Yeah, and then you've got two people who look very similar, and one of them will always be saying, no, I'm not connected with that organization, even though they put my face on there and I turned up to a few of their meetings. And it happens quite a lot that they do that.
He's threatened to sue them.
Good. Well, it would be, I suppose, if you had gone and you had agreed and all of that, it would probably, if it was just on words over the phone or something, it could probably be argued that there's no evidence that he gave their permission. But let's see if he actually takes them to court, because it's really easy to say that stuff, because it puts the other people on the back foot where they've got to produce some sort of evidence. But you can't really produce like documents without being called like breaking people's privacy and all of that sort of stuff. And that's like they play with each other on these things to stop each other having proper conversations. But I think they create both sides. I think the World Economic Forum is a CIA funded and created and CFR funded and created project to basically head towards globalism, the globalism that Kissinger saw. And for that, you need to be in charge of all sides. So I explain to people, a good way to explain it is in my own country, in Britain. When I was young, my first voting, you would either be able to vote for Tony Blair or William Hague, and both of them were young global leaders. And then David Cameron was young global leader, and Tony Blair's next one who took over, Gordon Brown, was a young global leader. And then, it just keeps going on. Boris Johnson, young global leader.
Now,
a guy now, Rishi
how
Sunak.
many young global leaders are there? I mean, is this the kind of thing where it's like, this person won a blue ribbon, and this person won a blue ribbon?
4,000 to 5,000
total
for something along
per year?
those lines. Yeah. No. It's pumping up now. But you basically, this is a long game, But it's not just World Economic Forum. There's also other leadership. Like I talked about, the German Marshall Fund has 5 different leadership courses that young leaders go through, and they're people who are sprinkled in the Congress and the Senate. If every leader came from the one course, of course, it would be like a outrage. So they've made 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 organizations that can all produce these leaders from separate areas, like Rhodes Scholars, who then go to Oxford for a year afterwards and get to know the deep state, and start doing really suspicious things and walking like zombies afterwards. These guys, they've all got these loads of different networks. So we're seeing the one at the moment. We can see the filter on. If we could then learn who the others are and start incorporating that into our view, eventually we'll see that the majority of people in power get there because they go through some form of organization which tells them that they can give them power and could potentially deliver that.
And they are like trustworthy people.
So who's the guy then? Are you a Trump man?
What, me? If I was in it,
the American.
Listen. I don't want to cause anybody too much pain on this, but if President Myvax wanted my vote, then he can go and jump, man. Yeah. President Myvax is out the door now. He might have got it before as a vote, but when he was like going, "Who's Myvax?" I was just like, "Oh man, you have just destroyed yourself." And I don't know. It's impossible because I hate everybody from that sort of sphere. All of it is just so rotten. It's so the American political system hurts.
I agree. It has me
taste.
wondering, as someone whose family's been here since a long time, hundreds of years. I just wonder what we do to take it back if that's what needs to be done. Violence is not really the way to go in 2023 and in the age of advanced arms. It's like, there's a process in place for the government to be by the people. How do we exercise that?
Yeah, well, ain't that the way? I think it's got to be breaking down to some form of localism, and then individual ability to have some sort of sway over your community, so everything becomes some sort of natural, homogenous sort of group of humans that works.
You build it from the bottom back up.
Yeah, but as well as that, like in something like that, where we get much more local and stop doing our vision every day through mobile phones and computers, are all global international stuff all the time being shoved into our face, and we're losing our cultural identities. And as we go back into that, if we are able to like work on a local level, I think you'll see different culture spring up in different places. But then there's a risk that if we all go and only work on a local level, then on the top levels they rule us all anyway in some way, shape or form. But their world is diverting off now with CBDs and other things that you have to get involved with at some point if you want to live in their world. And so there has to be alternative.
The electronic exchange.
Yeah. And who wants to live in that?
Bitcoin is perhaps the future, right? I don't own any, but
I feel really sad about it all, because like I talk to a lot of Bitcoiners, and they all are really optimistic, super optimistic, and I like their optimism and all of that. But there's going to be casualties at CBDCs. It's going to be, when they're trying to bring that in, there's going to be big casualties, and they've made it clear they're taking down the exchanges. That means no one will be able to actually take out their money and put it in the bank. That just like changes the game straight away. And so we really got to think about that stuff, because I mean, the CBDC stuff, you ask people, and this is a really hard thing, even for me as well. You ask people, what are you going to do when you can't buy petrol because they're asking for CBDCs? Or what are you going to do when you can't send your kids to school? You discover that people, like most people who haven't thought about it properly, get very emotional about it, because the fear that of their life being taken away becomes so it's also shocking. It's like shock horror. Changing the systems like this is going to be massive for everybody. I think it's going to just destroy minds.
But that's assuming that everyone in the supply chain of these things has no incentive to also be a human and to perhaps live by a precious metal or something similar.
That's why they use things like the World Economic Forum to make everybody toe the line, to make all of those people toe the line. So all of those people down the supply chain slowly get offered some sort of like idea that they're inside a club, and some sort of, I got a lovely feeling, I'm part of it all, and I'm making change, and I'm doing all of these good things. And a lot of the things they have to create, of course, we all know are fake in some way, or at least erroneous. How they're described to us, everything from the green movement onwards, can be questioned. Like so everything they do tastes funny, and it's not it's not the future.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, caller.
Sure. Well, to put a rose-colored tint on it, before I jump off the phone, I'll say that it could be an encouraging sign that all of the people that are actually involved in the real supply chains are downstream and unaffected by some of the shenanigans that these people think that they have control over.
Yeah. I love
people who do the work are not necessarily controllable.
And they're going to be your neighbors, man. And they're going to be the people who you're going to talk to.
They are my neighbors, bro.
All right, thanks. So I got to let you go.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
Yeah, bye.
All right, Johnny, we got another caller. I just want to get as many in as we can. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. This is awesome. Hello,
Danny.
Hey, who am I speaking with? 1 second. All right.
This is Monty out of Idaho. I called when Flat Dave was on.
Okay.
Hey, you're doing an awesome job, Danny.
Thanks, Monty.
You're doing an awesome job. What a wonderful show.
Thank you, man. So you're on with Johnny.
Have you heard about King Kill 33? It's a book by James Shelby Downard.
What's it called again? Sorry.
King Kill 33.
No.
A book by
like TEAM.
James Shelby. No, King KING KILL 33.
King Kill 33.
King Kill. It's by James Shelby Downard, and it has to do with the Masonics and how they off JFK and that kind of bullshit. Anyway, was just wondering.
No, I wonder. I
your guys'
want to.
show.
What's that?
Rocking, man.
I just got the book, and so I'm on like page 8, dude. So I just wondered if you'd already seen it.
No, not yet. But I'm pretty positive I'm going to end up digging away in there. Thanks for the suggestion, because I'm well into that. Sounds good.
All right, thanks, caller.
Awesome, dude. Have a good day, guys.
All right, we got another caller here. 1 second.
All right, thanks. Awesome, dude.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
Oh my
Can you just
God.
turn down your speakers?
Mute. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello?
All right, you're yeah. Hey, what's up? You are on with Johnny. Who am I speaking with?
Oh my God. I just have one question. That Cash App CEO that was stabbed recently.
Yeah.
I wonder if you
They
guys
found the
have
guy
any...
they found the guy who stabbed him.
Yeah, no. I'm curious if you think that has anything to do with the FedNow app that they're trying to push. Sorry, I'm like.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm not sure about this. I don't know.
The guy who was like the CEO of Cash App, which is like this payment transfer app or whatever, was stabbed in San Francisco by essentially what they're saying now, because everybody was chalking it up to like San Francisco's gone to shit, but it was like a disgruntled like former colleague. Some other tech guy.
Yeah, I think he was another startup CEO.
Yeah, something like that. They knew each other.
Money will bring you down. Cash will bring you down, they say. Well, it does eventually if you go digital. People get angry, very angry at digital money, you know.
Yeah, apparently this guy was like, he had all this, I don't know what these have to do, but they were saying he had all these qualifications that were fake. Like he had made up all these things that he said he did. So
I'm not surprised.
He was an interesting.
Yeah, we saw with the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff that these guys have got like intelligence collections galore. If you're allowed to the top of a big company that is, I mean, these guys. Can you imagine how much money is going through their systems? How much money they're making? It's just free money as well. By the time they've set up the algorithms and they've got this small team working on it, it's rolling and rolling and rolling, so they can sell off bits to here and there. These guys are rolling in it. They got so much money. And that's the first people that the intelligence agencies go to infiltrate, because it's like you've got money, you've got power.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious how that Sam Bankman-Fried thing will shake out. Any question? Any other question, caller?
No. That was all. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for calling. Yeah. All right. We got
Sam Bankman-Fried is doomed. Sam Bankman-Fried is doomed.
Like,
yeah.
Even with all the connections that he has, he's not going to get some sort of. Like I totally think from what
clock I hear, is ticking.
Yeah.
The clock is ticking. His time's done. I think his time's done.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a little more time left. If anybody wants to call in, we can call in. So, I think before some calls came in, we were talking about. Like where do you go with this? Like where? Yeah.
Well, I started like I kind of like duck in and out of different areas of interest. So like when people tell me stuff like this, I like to go here and I like to go there, but I can't focus in on just one thing at any one time, because otherwise I get really like it just gets boring. So I have like 5 or 6 different things going at any one time. And once I go through about 2 of them, I start to have questions that like go off loads of different angles. And some of them end up like, I got asked to research a line in Whitney Webb's book, one of the books, and it was just looking at the Cray brothers and the ownership of Esmeralda's barn, and it ended up with me writing a series that I'm like 5 articles deep into now. That really what I do is I look for the information about a subject that no one else has found, or tidbits that kind of give you a better grasp of who the characters were and why they were motivated to do what they do. And there's loads of places in history where you can go and find a story that people have told in 20 different ways all over the place, and you can just put the actual story together and give people a fact. At the moment, I've written like part 1 of the murder of Stanley Setti, which is like it's a 2-part murder about a guy who gets chopped up by a selection of very sharp knives, put into 3 parcels, and 2 of them are dumped out of a plane, a light aircraft, over the Thames near London, and wash up on a marsh embankment. And it's an extremely amazing story. And once you learn. This was 1949, and it was a guy called Stanley Setti who died, and the guy who killed him was Brian Donald Hume, and he is crazy as hell. He's mad, and he can convince everybody of everything. He gets away with literal murder, and he gets a lesser charge. And once he gets off, he admits that he killed him to everybody on the front page of one of the most popular newspapers. He confesses to the murder he got away with.
After he had got away with it?
Yeah, and they can't do anything about it. But then he goes on the run, and there's atomic espionage in there, and there's like the serial killers from the Rillington Place murders are in there, and they come up. And this, these stories in history, once you find them and you start going through, you realize, oh my God, this is something people are going to love. I tell you where I go with this. So I go. There's going to be a 3-piece series coming out soon that is like, every time you fill up an entire story, you can see all of the gaps. Yeah. And so as soon as you tell the stories,
just start filling those in, essentially.
Well, not filling those in. As soon as you touch the gap, the whole theory falls apart, and then reforms, and you realize that the whole story has not been told at all. And I'm at a point where I'm about to I finish off what I'm calling my magnum opus, is a 3-part series that will expose the Epstein scandal in a way that no one else has, which will go back 70 years to do so, and will completely and utterly blow people away, because all I do in life with journalism is dragnet all of the information I could possibly find and put it in chronological order, and that works a treat, because that's it. People are looking for truth, they're looking for source truth, they're looking to be able to go and check the facts, and they don't want my opinion. I can give an opinion right at the end of an article, but what they want is the story as it flows, and for it to have a start, beginning, middle, and end, and for it to make sense at the end. And if you put any selection of information together like that, you get a narrative that people can understand and connect to.
Cool. All right, we got one more caller. Let me just patch them in. Hello, caller.
Hey, Danny, what's going on, brother?
Hey, 1 second. Who am I speaking with? Hello. You're on the air with Johnny.
Hey, Johnny. How you doing, brother?
Yo, man. I'm doing good. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm smoking on a blunt, having a cup of tea. Life's all right, man.
Hey, I love that, man. Keep on trucking, dude. Hey, Danny, what up, man? It's Chris.
Hey, what's up, Chris?
Yeah, man. What's going on, Chris?
I noticed you mentioned a bunch of people were talking about, obviously, Klaus Schwab, but there's one group that I haven't heard mentioned yet, and I'm curious to know, Johnny, if you looked into the Jesuit connection with Schwab.
No, I haven't. Give me a little bit of your own theory, and then I'll be able to know if I got any linking information.
So one thing, what I focus on usually is, I mean, I do numbers and gematria and stuff, but I'm not talking about that today. I study a lot of the connections with the Jesuit order, and Klaus Schwab, like many of the people who have come to power, especially since 2020, from Trump to Fauci to Cuomo to Gavin Newsom, they're all Jesuit educated.
Wow, that is scary.
Every single one of them. Every single one of them. I mean, Klaus Schwab went to the University of Freiburg, which of course is one of the Jesuit schools.
I think his father probably went to
and-
the same school as well. I think he might have.
Yeah, I mean, my theory is, all roads lead to Rome, and
True.
the Jesuits had the stronghold in Switzerland until they were banned, and then coincidentally, they're let in a year later, almost to the day that the World Economic Forum was created.
Ancient infrastructure does not die. It stays intact so that when a new generation or two generations down the line have hidden away for long enough that a new form of route can be made with these connections, the infrastructure is all still there. They keep their schools, they keep their businesses. This is nearly every single order as well. All of these orders are competing in secret. Sometimes they have to go dark, like in a sense, intelligence. In a sense, these are the initial first intelligence agencies, really. They're like these organizations that know everything. These orders went around collating all the information, hearing all of the whispers, and going back and knowing exactly what's going on. So, this is like these guys. When you've got ancient orders, they will outlive what we create that's seeable. For sure. I'm not surprised the Jesuit stuff is so interesting. This sick puppies.
Oh yeah, and then it's their fingerprints are literally on. Oh, Danny, man, their fingerprints are literally on everything.
Okay, in the after show, we're gonna look into the Jesuits, Herman Kahn, got a couple other things. I gotta learn about the Jesuits.
And like I said. Like I said, we were talking Templars. It's all, like you said, ancient orders. But yeah, definitely, Johnny, look into like some of these connections. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, they definitely have Jesuit fingerprints just written all over them.
Yeah, willing to accept any theory, and seeing as there's a Jesuit Pope on the throne who looks really
100%, who comes from Argentina.
Yeah. He's right in the World Economic Forum. He's so far up Schwab's butt that he's turned into a polar bear and he's melting.
Man, I'm telling you, dude, it's a rabbit hole that won't disappoint because you'll just see the connections and it'll take you there.
I hope you're not talking about Klaus Schwab's ass now when you say rabbit hole. But yeah. I agree. I will look. I promise.
All right, thanks,
awesome,
Chris.
Man. Good show once again, Dan. You loving it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Chris.
We got one question from the chat here. Here we go from South Coast Horizon. He says, what about the little talked about European royal families? Growing up, I always heard that there was a faction 1 and faction 2 of a New World Order.
Yeah, completely. Oh, God, that even links in with this story because down there in Oberschwabia, over there near the University of Freiburg, I think it's near, is the school or the Schloss. It's one of the most elite schools around. And Prince Philip went there, and all of these other people, Eckhard von Königsberg, who's Laura Kuenssberg's granddad. She was the head of the BBC politics news stuff at one point, and he was a massive pioneer in things. And these people become powerful because they have their connections, because they're hanging around with the royals. And when I was doing a recent series, I did the Black Hand series. I was looking through all of these London clubs where all of these British royals were hanging out, and it's mine that these guys, all of these guys who were in this little set of these swanky nightclubs in Knightsbridge and Mayfair and all of this, they were also friends with people who were all the European royal families, and so they'd be constantly going between these places, and girls would go missing. Women were going missing, and it's really fantastically interesting that then all of their alibi of them still being alive that's given, or the reason they know they're still alive is, they're over in Italy with so and so.
Yeah, this is so long ago when you're like, we'll wait for a letter.
And they've been with us, and now they've gone on to them over there, and they're all minor royals all over the place, and they basically there's a network, a really, really interesting network, and they are schooled in a different way, they are brought up in a different way, and they have a different understanding of what our culture and civilization and our nationhood looks like.
Okay, I want to ask you one last thing, and we're going to wrap this up. I appreciate again your time. I want to know about the Bill Gates thing. So that's in or more about it. Sorry, the Bill Gates, because I guess you say that you found that he is a direct ancestor of the Knight of King Henry VIII's realm. So I guess how did you find that out? And then also, what is the significance there?
I was watching the Corbett Report, as any good person should, and I was learning all about Bill Gates' father and his grandfather, William Gates the First, William Gates the Second, and of course now we got William Gates the Third, who's on the throne at the moment of the Gates family.
Yeah.
And they all, if you go back in history, now these guys were heavily into eugenically leaning organizations, or just plain eugenics organizations, if you go back far enough. And then I was interested to see where that led, and it didn't seem to be much about the historical line of Bill Gates. So I looked into it, and it's like Joseph Stanton Gates after William Gates the First, and then you get to, I think you instantly get to Israel Gates, and Israel Gates is from a family of about 8 or 9 and lives in he might be the grandfather of Joseph Stanton Gates, but anyway, but he would be the great grandfather of Bill Gates. Wow. Direct line. And Israel Gates lived in Rhode Island when it was right at the peak of the slave trade. And it was seeing 90% of all the slaves coming through Africa were going through Rhode Island, and everybody who lived in Rhode Island worked in the slave trade. So he was from a big family around that time in that place. I couldn't find anything about that as of yet. But then you go back further, you get, these are the ancestors of Stephen Gates the First. And Stephen Gates the First was the first of the Gates family to come across from Britain. He brought a load. They were a drama family as well. He wrote his own book of his life and stuff. So there's lots of information about Stephen Gates the First. But people didn't really know Joseph Stanton Gates' relationships, the relations before Joseph Stanton Gates. So I managed to go back through this direct line: Israel Gates, Stephen Gates' ancestor, Stephen Gates the First, Eustace Gates, who was the last Gates to live in Britain, also big family. That was Stephen Gates the First's father, and they were in hiding at this point. And this is because bloody Queen Mary had chopped off a load of Gates's heads for trying to do a coup and depose. It's you can't make it up. So you go back far enough, and basically the direct line of Bill Gates, all of the fathers, all the way down, leads you to Geoffrey Gates the First, who's the first Sir Geoffrey Gates, and then Sir Geoffrey Gates the Second, and then Sir Geoffrey Gates the Third, and then Sir Geoffrey Gates the Fourth. And these guys have gone through loads of kings. They've King Edward does something over here, and then King Henry VIII eventually.
Wow.
And King Henry VIII, so Sir Geoffrey Gates IV was a knight of King Henry VIII's realm, and his brother Sir John Gates is the ghost that haunts Beasley Abbey in Essex.
Your history goes so far back there.
Yeah, because Mary, the first day she took over, Henry died, and these Gates are walking alongside his coffin at the procession of his funeral, So you imagine Bill Gates, someone who looks like Bill Gates, walking alongside, dressed up with a halberd on and his little helmet on and stuff, and they go to procession. Of course, King Henry VIII's son, Edward, takes over, and Edward's like a sickly little boy. He's 9 when he takes over. He's 17 when he dies. And when he's died, they all shit themselves. Put Jane Seymour on the throne, because otherwise the Catholic, the heretic, oh my God, bloody Queen Mary, she'll come to the throne. And they tried to stick one of Henry VIII's exes on the throne, and it did not work. They failed, and everybody on the first day that she took charge, the very first day, she chopped off the heads of Sir John Gates and Sir Geoffrey Gates IV. Both of them got the job, and his wife as well. It is a brilliant talk where Sir John Gates goes up to the gallows. I was
going to say, how long did it take you to get
That's like, I don't know. It depends. It depends how lucky. I would say it's anywhere between a couple of days and a couple of months.
Okay.
There's some articles
it's not linear.
take a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, we got to wrap this up. I appreciate your time. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, okay. Thank you very much for having me on. I have launched a new site called Newspaste at newspaste.com, and I want it to be a place where people can go and reach across the border, listen to the other side, and it's a place for the most censored of the independent news because it's like that. It will tackle the big subjects, and it will look at all of the things. The podcast will look at people who are struggling to have a voice, but who are on the other side to me as well. So the person I spoke yesterday is a technocrat working for a technocrat who believes in people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, people who I warn against. And I really want to cross that border, and I really want to bring people proper news from the independent realm. No MSN, unless it's been deleted, then the MSN can make it up there. If they've done so, there's a fair few deleted Epstein articles that are going up that's been deleted from the archives completely, and you can't find anywhere else. I want it to be a place of knowledge, so come to newspaste.com, and I'm also at johnnyvedmore.com, and I thank you for having
appreciate
me.
it, man. That was a fantastic episode. I appreciate it very much. Everybody, you can find me in the after show. We're gonna start in around 10 minutes tomorrow night. New episode of the Bathhouse, 10:30 p.m. Thank you very much, Johnny, for joining me, and thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Good night.
Poet, you know it, all my shit heroic. Empathic abilities, yeah, my face be also stoic. Bleep, blow up, nigga, that just means I'm working. They see me as a leader, so that's why I'm Captain Kirkin. These tracks from the stars, that much is for certain. You can feel this hit if you up or if you hurt. I'm raising my stock, not talking my feet in some Birkin. Number Johnny 5, got a fucking short circuit. Bring the track to life when I spit phenomenal. When I hit, she feel that shit in her abdominals. These rappers make me laugh like comic view, they comical. You know I got a ball out, I hit the track running just like Sonic do. They don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, they was trying to get me on my hype shit. Yeah, they don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, and they tried to down me on some KO type shit. Yeah, they don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, now we pulling up fresh on some flight shit. Ha. They don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, they don't want to turn on my light switch. They don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, they was trying to get me on my hype shit. Yeah, they don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, and they tried to down me on some KO type shit. Yeah, they don't want to turn on my light switch. Yeah, I'm pulling up fresh on some flight shit.